Good morning and welcome to Trevor Phillips on Sunday. They think it's all over. For 55 years, those famous words have conjured memories of English football's greatest triumph. This evening, the current crop of international stars has the chance to write its own piece of history. If they do, new memories will be made and new phrases may be immortalised to accompany them. We hope so, because on this show, we're obviously above tired clichés. Now, one area where some people may think it's almost all over, but it really isn't, is the fight against COVID-19. A week tomorrow, restrictions in England are set to be lifted. But as cases continue to rise, there are concerns about what the consequences of that will be. The government continues to trumpet the success of its vaccine rollout. But the pace of vaccination is slowing, and ministers are considering reducing the gap between first and second doses. So even that is coming under close scrutiny. Well, today we'll be putting questions about that vaccine rollout to the perfect person, the Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi. He'll be joining us in just a moment. Now, despite the fact that we're above football clichés, you could describe today as a show of two halves. Later, we'll be looking ahead of the Euro 2020 final with former England defender Martin Keown and getting the view from the Italian side with Italy's top defender, their ambassador to the UK, Raffaele Trombetta. We'll also be speaking to the Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green, and the National Statistician, Sir Ian Diamond, who sits on SAGE. But first, Boris Johnson is expected to confirm tomorrow that lockdown restrictions will be lifted on July the 19th, despite the rise we're seeing in infections. To talk about that and much more, we're joined by one of the government's top strikers, the Vaccine Minister Nadhim Zahawi. Good morning, Minister. Now, tomorrow the Prime Minister says he's going to confirm whether July the 19th will herald the lifting of restrictions. Are you seeing anything in the data that might prevent him giving us the green light?
So you're quite right. Tomorrow the Prime Minister will, as he outlined a week ago, that he will share with the country the latest data. The really good news is that 86% now, almost 87% of all adults have got the protection of one dose, and 65% are now protected with two doses. The target is that we get to 66% double jabbed by the 19th of July. We will meet that target. So I'm confident that we can proceed to step forward, but cautiously. And we will be setting out tomorrow guidelines on everything from mask wearing, the transition from sort of mandating or government by diktat to taking personal responsibility, whether for our own actions or corporate responsibility at Sky and obviously at Transport for London and elsewhere, about proceeding cautiously. I think you said it at the outset of your programme. This pandemic is not over. We're seeing a rise in infection rates in this country, but also in Europe and elsewhere. The difference is, for us, is that the vaccination program has been so successful that we are, as I say, almost 87% of all adults have been protected with one dose, and we will hit that 66% with double dose. So it was right to give ourselves a bit more time. If you remember, we paused for 4 weeks to be able to protect more people.
Minister, does all of that program include the prospect of reducing the interval between first and second doses, as is being reported this morning?
No, I'm slightly puzzled where that story's come from, because obviously I engage almost on a daily basis with my colleagues at the JCVI and Professor Wei Shen and Professor Antti Handen, who look at this very closely. The real-world data, the clinical data, suggests that actually the 8-week interval offers that additional fortification in terms of protection with the two doses, much better than having the interval shortened any further. And of course, the Prime Minister announced that now we've brought down that interval from 12 to 8 weeks for all adults. So anybody who gets their first dose now, and I absolutely encourage everyone, as hopefully they'll be doing, we've got a site next to Wembley Stadium who will be also offering those jabs, and at Millwall Stadium and lots of other football stadiums, Etihad and elsewhere. If they get their jab now, they'll get their second jab within that 8-week interval. That is the clinical advice, and that's the advice we will follow.
So we can be clear, to take today's jargon that when it comes to vaccine, you have to hold and you have to give at the right time. You've decided, actually, that there is going to be no change on that.
Well, obviously, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, these are the experts, look at this all the time, and their advice is very clear that the real-world data suggests that the 8-week interval is actually the best in terms of giving everyone who's had their first dose, their second dose, and that protection, the added boost in terms of both antibodies and T cells is within that 8-week interval rather than shortening it any further.
Okay. Let's clear up one thing that has created a small mystery this week. You and other ministers have been saying for some weeks that the link between vaccination and serious illness, hospitalisation and death has been weakened but not broken. But on Wednesday, the Prime Minister said it has been broken. Now, if anybody should know what the truth of that is, it's you. What is true? Has the link been weakened or has it actually been broken?
Well, I think the Prime Minister at the press conference last week talked about, as did Patrick Vallance, that
so we're
link
clear. He said at Prime Minister's
Yeah.
questions that scientists are absolutely clear that we have severed the link. Now, is he right, or are you still saying what you did before, which is that it's weakened?
I think there's whether it's the language of sort of completely severing the link or otherwise, the reality is that we, through the vaccination program, have severely weakened the link between infection rates and hospitalization and serious infection. If you look at the data, so I looked at this before coming on your show, as of Friday, in terms of people in hospital, 62% of those in hospital, of the 2,300 people in hospital in England, 62% are under the age of 55. In the previous waves, that would have been the other way around. So it would have been the majority would have been over the age of 55. Only 15% are over 75. So it is weakened, but people are still obviously getting infected. The majority of people who are severely infected are those who are unvaccinated, which is why I go back to the same message, saying, if you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated.
I get all of that, but we're not dancing on the head of a pin here. The distinction is important. Whether I have broken my arm or I have severed my arm, rather different situations. So what we're being clear about this morning is that we're still in the realm of the link being weakened, but not severed. So the Prime Minister, let's call it, misspoke.
It has been severely weakened through the vaccination program, and the Prime Minister, I think, I listened to the press conference, he spoke very clearly, as did Patrick Vallance, that the link has been weakened by the vaccination program, the success of the vaccination program. I think it's important that we remain cautious and careful, and the guidelines that we'll set out tomorrow will demonstrate that, including guidelines that people are expected to wear masks in indoor enclosed spaces, and of course to remain vigilant with hands and face and to just remember that if we all act responsibly, as we did with the vaccination program, the nation came together to vaccinate. 80,000 vaccinated volunteers came forward, out of retirement, and to vaccinate. We can come together and deal with this pandemic in a way that is responsible by thinking about our own actions and how they impact other people, including, of course, people who are maybe immunocompromised.
All right. Minister, I'm sorry if I appear to be hurrying you up a little bit, but there's a lot to talk about and a lot to get clear. The Office for National Statistics tells us that the 7-day average for vaccinations dropped from over 200,000 in late June to just around 100,000 at the beginning of July. Would you accept that we're running into a period of slower vaccination rates?
Yes, I do. And these are the hard yards, Trevor. So back to the numbers I quoted you earlier, we're almost at 87% of all adults have now got their first dose. The majority, we were running at about 96% return for their second dose. I want to get that to 100% if I can. The Office for National Statistics also say that 96% of all adults will very likely take the vaccine. They think very positively about vaccines. So the hard yards are to get that 86, 87% where we are today to 90+% vaccinated, because actually what we need to make sure is, as the virus gets desperate and attempts to infect people, to mutate and be able to survive, we should continue to fortify the nation with the vaccination program, because that is the way we transition it from pandemic to endemic status and deal with it in the future with the booster campaign in September, as per the interim advice from JCVI, and of course then maybe an annual vaccination program for COVID as well as for flu, which we're planning to begin from September and look at how we can co-administer flu and COVID.
The reason I asked you about that, Minister, is that there's a crunch coming here, isn't there? Your boss, the Health Secretary, says that we might be looking at 100,000 infections a day, that if we keep the pinging regime as it is, we might be talking about 1 million and more people being pinged and self-isolating every week. And that's just if we assume that it's just 2 infections per person, and nobody's sure about that. The point is that the government has rested pretty much everything on your continuing success on keeping the vaccine rollout at pace. The problem is, you guys are taking a bit of a punt here, aren't you? You are gambling that the vaccine rollout can keep ahead of all of those other problems, including the possibility of variants. It is a gamble.
So, Trevor, there are no easy decisions to make on this, and let me try and bring it to life for your viewers. On Friday, I do my constituency surgery. I went to visit a business in Ulster called Orange Mabel, which is a lovely tea shop in Ulster, who's really weathered the storm and survived through the pandemic, and has reopened and is trying everything they can to continue to survive and thrive. They lost 2 members of staff to suicide because of the lockdown. So there are other damage that is being done through the severe lockdown that we have endured. Now, the vaccination program, you're right, the vaccination program is our way out of this. So at 87% almost of all adults vaccinated with 1 dose, 2/3 with 2 doses, I think it's the right time, because obviously as we take advantage of the summer where schools being out will have a downward pressure on the R number. Of course, the socializing and interaction has an upward pressure, but there is no perfect timing for this. It's the right thing to do, because actually, as the Secretary of State, and you mentioned that in his interview today in the Telegraph, talks about 13 million operations that we need to make sure happen.
Indeed.
And the NHS stands ready to do that. So there is no perfect timing. We just have to remain cautious.
I want to come to that in a second, but let's deal with the next couple of months. Could you actually tilt the playing field a bit in your favour by doing certain things? For example, at one point we talked about test and release. That is to say, people like me old people who've had 2 vaccinations could be tested rather than having to self-isolate. Or that we could release NHS staff from the possibility of self-isolation. Now, are you thinking seriously about those kinds of steps that would at least take away some of the potential for chaos?
Yeah, so really good point. So the NHS app, one has been an incredible success. 25 million downloads of the NHS app, hundreds of thousands of people saved from being infected. But of course, the app was developed and operationalized at a time when we didn't have vaccines. Now we're in a world where we have almost 87% of people protected with 1 dose, 2/3 with 2 doses by 90. So we should absolutely, and the team are looking at how we use that app in terms of alerting people to those around them who test positive. Of course, if you do test positive, you have to and should rightly then self-isolate. But it's important to look at that in a new context of this massive vaccination program and make sure that it is fit for purpose for this new world, including, for example, being able to take maybe 5 days, as we have piloted, of lateral flow tests and upload them to the system rather than having to self-isolate. In the case of NHS workers, if they're wearing their protective equipment and PPE, then even today they don't need to self-isolate if they feel that although they've been pinged, it's advisory, but if they feel they've protected themselves properly, then they don't need to self-isolate. Hence why we're able to plan for how we cope with what the Secretary of State talks about, which is getting back to a place where we can have those 13 million operations happen. Those with cancer, 19 out of 20 getting the treatment they need already, but we want to be at 20 out of 20.
So those tweaks are on the table. That's news for us. Can I just take you to the point that you were discussing a moment ago, which is the backlog? Health Secretary says possibly 13 million people. How will opening up on July 19th help in any way in dealing with that backlog of 13 million patients who the Health Secretary himself says have not come forward in the last year and a half? I mean, how does that make sense?
Well, because, as he quite rightly outlined in his interview, that it's that sort of British sense of wanting to protect the NHS and fairness, and whilst we are in a severe lockdown, people may have not been coming forward. I think it's right now, with the £1 billion that is totally focused, that we have made available to the NHS on dealing with that backlog, that the NHS now is able to do that. It has done that for cancer patients throughout the pandemic, and I absolutely admire and hold in real awe my colleagues in the NHS and what they've been able to do. But this is the time now to effectively make sure that we support the NHS to deal with that, whilst also making sure we do the booster campaign in September and the flu inoculation in September, because actually what you want to make sure is in the autumn period, where we haven't had much flu virus circulating in communities, we protect against flu and COVID, because in a bad year, 20,000 people could perish because of the flu virus.
Let's get this absolutely clear. I mean, it sounds like what you're really saying here is that you think that the possibility of 100,000 infections a day is less alarming than, for example, the problem that you're looking forward to, or the prospect of problems in the autumn of a different kind, flu and so forth. Can you just get clear with us, what is it that has persuaded you to take effectively to take this risk that we might find ourselves with this huge number of infections, with all that implies for the raised possibility of mutations and new variants that the vaccines can't deal with?
So it's worth just reminding your viewers that our very strong, stringent border controls continue, and you have to take a test before travel, a test after 2 days of being here. The red list remains in place for over 50 countries. That's really important, because that's how, even if you are double vaccinated and you want to come in from an amber-list country, you still have to take that test after 2 days of arrival. So we're not, throwing caution to the wind in this case. The guidelines you will see next week will also demonstrate very clearly what people need to do and are expected to do. For example, on mask wearing. All these things are a cautious but pragmatic way of getting us back to as close to normal as possible by the 19th of July. Now, the important thing to remember is that this is not over yet, and we have to be careful. We have to be vigilant. We have to see what's happening in other countries vis-a-vis variants. You're absolutely right. and that will continue. That will not change. So this is not a let's just go out and forget about the virus. The virus is still with us, and we have to be cautious. But it's the right thing to do, because as I hope described to you what was a moving experience for me on Friday, of a businesswoman telling me that 2 of her staff committed suicide because of lockdown.
All right. Minister, so much more that we could be talking about, but unfortunately today is today, and I had to take just a few seconds to ask you a question that we're asking all our guests today. What's the score tonight going to be?
I am not even going to attempt to answer that question, Trevor, because I do not want to jinx it. I travelled with England to Germany. I travelled to Japan.
No. You can't see, but I have a whiteboard here. There are thousands and millions of people who are hanging on your every word, and we cannot leave this interview without a number, 2 numbers on this whiteboard. Come on.
I'm not going to do it. I am not going to do it. I can't. It's too painful. 55 years ago, we had a win. We will win tonight. I am 54 years old, and I literally, as I say, I'm a football fan. I've travelled with England to Germany and to Japan. I am not going to jinx it today, this morning, to your viewers, but we're going to win.
All right, I have written the word chicken on my whiteboard here. Let me see if you've got an answer to this question. Bank holiday or not, if we win?
I'm not going to jinx that either. There is no way I'm going to be presumptuous on your programme and say that we're going to have a bank holiday.
Okay, double chicken Nando's here. Thank you very much, Minister.
Great to see you.
Okay. As we were just discussing, COVID case numbers are on the rise, but it's as yet unclear whether the link between cases and serious illness and death has been broken or just weakened. One person who might be able to shed some light on this is the man who understands the data as well as anybody, the national statistician, Sir Ian Diamond, who joins us now. Sir Ian, you're the national stato in today's lexicon, and one of the measures that you keep an eye on is the prevalence of antibodies, whether they come into us by vaccination or by infection. But it's a sign of how close we are to this thing that people talk about, herd immunity. How do you think we're doing right now on that?
I have to say, Trevor, good morning. It's lovely to see you. I have to say that I think with regard to antibodies, we are doing very, very well. I'd have to say that antibodies aren't a perfect protection, but at the same time, we're saying very clearly that we think that about 9 in 10 people in England, in Wales and in Northern Ireland, about 8 in 10 in Scotland do have antibodies at the moment. And let's be fair, that's up from 2 in 10 in January. So I think there is an enormous increase. I have to say the group with the lowest at around about 60% is those aged 15 to 24. So clearly the vaccination program that the Minister was just talking about remains incredibly important, but certainly we're making an enormous amount of progress, an absolutely admirable amount of progress.
OK, so we're moving along, though we've got some work to do with younger people. One of the issues where there's uncertainty is about the relationship between the average number of contacts that an infected person has and the likely probability of infection. Based on what we've seen previously, at the moment they're talking about 2 infections per infected person, as it were. Based on what we've seen before, how many contacts do you think each positive case is likely to be having in the next period?
I mean, Trevor, that's an incredibly, well, it's not just a difficult, it's almost an impossible question, because I don't need to talk to you about distributions, and I don't need to talk to you about the challenge of looking at it. I should also say that, it really does depend on the contact. Professor Kath Noakes at Leeds University has spoken eloquently about different types of contacts and how you could get a contact, but you'd be so unlucky just from walking past someone, as opposed to very close contact in a crowded space. So I just think the numbers don't talk about the context, and it would be wrong to answer that.
OK, but do you think that the Health Secretary's estimate, it's not an estimate, but his upper projection, if you like, of 100,000 infections a day, do you think that's credible?
Well, I think what we're seeing at the moment, and let me be clear, we are keeping an absolutely close minute-by-minute eye on the number of infections that we are seeing in our very, very large survey, which does give us some of the best data in the world, because let's remember, many people who do get the virus are asymptomatic, and those data will continue to be incredibly important, and I thank everybody who takes part in them. What we are seeing is, yes, an increase. So our most recent data for England has at about 1 in 160 people. That's about 0.6%. Now that's going up quite quickly. Having said that, it's still slightly less than a third of where we were on the 2nd of January this year. Scotland is a bit higher, although the numbers of infections seem to be flattening a little in Scotland. So, look, Trevor, the numbers are going up. They're driven largely, I would have to say, by, at the moment, the big increases in the northeast. The northwest had big increases and is at the same levels as the northeast. There's a slight trend towards a flattening there, and things are very much lower, with the lowest levels in the east of England and the southeast of England. So at the moment, definitely an increase driven by, at the moment, largely the northeast, and driven very much by people aged 18 to 24. We're seeing very, very little increase in people aged over 50, for example, and I think that's encouraging. So I'm not going to demur with projections into the future, but I'd have to say the projections into the future have very large confidence intervals associated with them.
But you don't rule out the possibility of 100,000 a day?
Well, I think it would be wrong to completely rule it out. But I would have to say that at the moment we don't have the data either, really, to put a firm number on things. But we are seeing a steady and fast increase in the northeast, steady increases elsewhere. As I say, low increases in the southeast and the east of England.
Underlying the judgments that the government has to make, which are not your judgments, I understand that you're not in this field, but underlying it is a view about whether the link between infection and hospitalisation and serious disease and death has truly been broken. Now, in the stats world, we'd be talking about random relationships and all of that. But, in simple terms, where do you stand on this? Do you think that link has effectively been broken or not?
Well, I'm in the severely weakened school for the very simple reason that we need to continue tirelessly to look at the data, and we are at the, if you like, the beginning at the moment of looking at this, and all the evidence, as the Vaccine Minister just said to you, is that we have a younger cohort of people being hospitalised at the moment, and while hospitalisations are going up, they are now a long way from some of the levels we have seen before. And so I'm very hopeful that we have really made a strong break. But at the same time, I would have to say at the moment, all the evidence allows me to say severely weakened.
Taking all of this together, and I want to ask you about a particular event as a sort of example of judgment that has to be made. Next month, Manchester United play Leeds, first game of the season, 14th of August. 75,000 people at Old Trafford. Now, were you to be offered a ticket for that game, would you be going along to spend the afternoon, 75,000 people, most of whom would not be wearing masks, given the levels of compliance? What would you advise?
Well, Trevor, I spend a long time, first of all, if it was you who was offering me the ticket, trying to swap it for one at Torquay United. But having said that, a couple of points you made. Why is it that you say that not many people would be wearing masks? We are seeing from our data, our opinions and lifestyle survey, that the great majority of people are saying they would continue to wear masks in crowded places. Were I to be going, I would be wearing a mask. So, I think we have to think very carefully about making those kind of assumptions. And I do think that again, people will be making decisions on the basis of what they see the risk at that time, and I'm sure the great majority of people would be looking at both that risk and what the risks were before taking the final decision.
Okay, so Ian, you're probably the most statistically literate guest that we've ever had on this programme. Statistically speaking, what's going to happen tonight?
Oh, well, look, I've been saying to anyone who will ask, 1-1 after extra time, and we will win on penalties.
Penalties? Oh, okay.
Football is coming home, Trevor.
You've actually anticipated my question. Thank you. So, England win on penalties?
No question.
You heard it here first. So, Ian, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, Labour has suggested it does support the lifting of restrictions on July the 19th, but Sir Keir Starmer will still warn this week that the government's approach could lead to a summer of chaos and confusion. Let's find out where Labour really stands on everything we've been discussing so far. We're joined by one of Sir Keir's holding midfielders, the party's Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green. Kate Green, would you support the reduction of an interval between the first and second jabs if the JCVI were to recommend it? I know we heard from Nadhim Zahawi, he's not thinking about it, but it's obviously in the air.
Clearly, if there is advice from the JCVI that would be a safe and sensible measure, we've always said that it's right to act on the advice. And clearly, the vaccination programme has been a hugely important tool in our ability to combat the virus. But the priority, of course, now is also to make sure that people who have not been vaccinated at all get the vaccine. And it is concerning that the rate of vaccinations is slowing and that some groups have still not been able to come forward and be vaccinated. And so I think the priority has got to be to spread the vaccine programme to the maximum so that we keep everyone as safe as possible.
This is interesting because you're now telling me that you're worried about the pace of vaccination, which we see slowing down, as I discussed with the Minister. Sir Keir described the government's course as reckless, yet, as far as we understand it, Labour is supporting the government's decision to lift restrictions on July the 19th. Isn't that a bit like saying that the driver's gone a bit bonkers, but we are completely content to let him drive us into the ditch?
Well, we do want to see the restrictions lifted on the 19th, subject to the data, and I think we're still waiting for that final data in the coming day or two. But what we don't want is to lift the restrictions without keeping mitigations in place that would enable that to happen more safely. So, for example, that's why we've said that the mandatory mask wearing should continue in public places. It's why we've said that there should be more support and requirement on public spaces to have proper ventilation systems. It's why we've said that the financial support for people on low incomes who have to isolate needs to be adequate so that they can afford to do that. So yes, we do want to see the restrictions lifted if the data confirm that that's the right thing to do, and I hope, and the indications seem to be that it will do. But we want that with the mitigations kept in place.
OK, well, let's test this out a little bit and take a concrete example. You just raised the question of mask discipline. Now, what the government's going to do is allow people to go to nightclubs, abandon social distancing and the rule of 30, no requirement for nightclubs. Now, it may be that you and I won't be particularly vulnerable to that. I don't know, how we might spend our Fridays and Saturday nights next month. But is it your idea that as long as we keep masks on, it doesn't matter how up close and personal we get in nightclubs?
Well, first of all, Trevor, I'm not one of the world's great clubbers. I wish you'd asked me the old Trafford question, since I'm sitting just.
I'm coming to that. Don't worry, we will get there.
Good, excellent. But, masks are not the only protection, and venues will be looking at putting in place a whole range of mitigations, and it's absolutely right that they should, and that they should be subject to the proper health and safety requirements that are placed on them. But, masks, we've just heard from Siri and Diamond, people want to wear masks. Most people feel more comfortable and confident when others are wearing masks around them. And I think this, we'll leave it up to individuals, people can take personal responsibility. That's a recipe for confusion. I'm afraid it's probably a recipe for more confrontations. And I just think it would be much clearer and simpler for the government to keep mandatory mask wearing in public places in place after the 19th of July.
But why don't you guys follow through then and say, look, you know what? The nightclubs, we're not ready for that. Why don't you just have the courage of your convictions and say that?
I think it is very important that we get the balance between health and people's economic well-being, which after all is an important factor in good health, get that balance right. And of course, we know that the hospitality and entertainment sector has suffered terribly in this pandemic. I am concerned that we should respond very quickly to any new data we receive, and that all the protections that we can put in place are put in place. And going back to your first point, Trevor, it is really important, especially if the typical clubber is probably younger, that we make sure that that vaccination programme reaches everybody who should be receiving a vaccine, and particularly young people, so that we make everyone as safe as possible.
OK, let me just try one last test of your position. And this is something you can't put on the government. The two mayors of the largest cities, or first and third largest cities, Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham, have the tube and the tram under their control. Will they be requiring a mandatory mask on those forms of transport? It's in their hands. What is Labour going to say about that?
I hope they will, and I believe, I think I'm right in saying that Andy has already indicated that here in Manchester, that's what he will do. I certainly think that having travelled regularly on both the tube and the tram all through the pandemic when I was allowed to, that wearing masks and seeing others wearing masks is a source of great reassurance, and people want to do it.
OK, the Old Trafford question, Manchester United playing Leeds, 14th of August. Are you fine with 74,000 people turning up, most of them without masks?
Well, as Sireen said, I don't think we know that it's most of them without masks. And I do know, having a long-standing relationship with Manchester United, they're in my constituency here, that they will go to great lengths to keep people safe and make sure that protections and mitigations are in place.
You're going to be there, right?
No, I'm not, sadly. This ticket you're offering, if it's still going spare, send it my way. But I would really encourage people who are going to that game to keep themselves and others around them safe, and please wear a mask and follow the instructions that stewards are giving you, because it's outdoors. There's less risk of infection spreading when you are outdoors, as we know. But I think every measure that we can take, we should take to defeat this terrible virus. OK. You've issued a statement today about the government's plans for legislation against hate speech in higher education. And what you said, or what the party has said in its release, is Labour say the law is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Let me read you some names. J.K. Rowling, Julie Bindel, Amber Rudd, Selina Todd, Kevin Price. You know what they've all got in common. They have all been cancelled. In fact, one of them's lost their job over what they have said about the issue of women as a sex, as opposed to
the view that's taken by some trans rights activists that there is no such thing, essentially. Now, are you really saying that there is nothing to see here? This problem doesn't exist?
There are, and always have been, a very small number of instances. And I think those examples that you gave, in many cases, perhaps in all cases, I'm not familiar with every single one of those examples, Trevor.
I could have given you another dozen.
Well, please, but Trevor, in the last year for which we have data, out of 10,000 events, only 6 were cancelled. 4 because they had the wrong paperwork. 1 went to another venue. 1 was a pyramid scheme. If you look across the piece, there are a very small number of events that are cancelled. I think there is obviously a concern about the atmosphere, the climate on campus, but that cuts both ways. And if we have, as I believe this legislation does, a law that allows people actually to come on campus as Holocaust deniers, to spread hate speech, anti-vaxxers, I don't think that's in the public interest. And I think that has a chilling effect. And I think we don't need this legislation. We already have...
If I may say so, though,
on campus in law, and I think that this actually gives succour to people who want to sow hate and division, and to their lawyers. They'll be running off to court regularly. And I don't think you make good law on the basis of a small number of cases.
If I may say so, you say it's a small number of cases, but for every individual who is fired because of what they have said, it's 100%. So let me just ask you again, is the Labour view that nothing to see here?
I'm not saying there are no cases at all. What I am saying is it's a very small number of incidents when you look at the number of events that have gone ahead quite satisfactorily on campus, and that we already have satisfactory legislation. We've had it going back to the 1986 Education Act, and then strengthened, I would say, by Labour's Human Rights Act. What we don't need is legislation that now allows Holocaust deniers, anti-vaxxers, people spreading hate speech to run off to the courts if a student union or a university says,
all right.
Welcome. I don't want that, and I don't think...
OK, Kate Green, I know you know a lot about education, but I think you know quite a lot about football as well. What's the score tonight? What is going on here? Are we now a country of snowflakes who can't even predict our own victory?
But I will make it.
Oh, no, you're back.
Naturally, no.
OK. Apparently, viewers, the line has frozen. Oh, I'm being told Kate is back. Come on, Kate, quickly.
I'm going to give you a score, Trevor. 2-1.
2-1. Thank you, Kate Green, our first guest who's got the courage to call it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, before we move on, a quick announcement. This week, we were delighted that Trevor Phillips on Sunday received Albert Certification. This is an award given by BAFTA that goes to TV shows and productions that meet sustainable targets, tackle the environmental impact of broadcasting, and encourage others to act in a more eco-friendly way. We do this by, amongst other things, reducing and offsetting travel, minimising our use of energy, recycling, and avoiding single-use plastic. It's all part of Sky's ambition to become net zero carbon by 2030. So you'll now see this logo at the end of our show each week, and hopefully on other parts of Sky News very soon. Now, it probably hasn't escaped your attention, if I haven't done enough to draw your attention to it, that England's footballers are playing in their first major tournament final in 55 years tonight. Like 1966, the game will take place at Wembley, and they'll be looking to win the European Championship for the first time when they take on Italy. To talk about this, we're joined by a man who won 43 England caps, former Arsenal defender and invincible Martin Keown. Martin Keown, you are one of the few living Englishmen who has actually beaten Italy in a international, and you did that in 1997, playing alongside Gareth Southgate. So tonight's game's got Martin Keown written all over it. Let's start with England. How do you rate this team?
So England, it's a joy to watch England play at the moment, and I just feel that the unity between the people and the players now is just an amazing. And today, for anyone lucky enough to be in the stadium, I think it's a privilege to be there, both for the players who've been magnificent. Of course, the manager has led the way. He's a very calm man, and they're going to need some of that calmness today. They've been magnificent, and the fans have responded. So the atmosphere today, I can only imagine what that's going to be like. The players need to draw off it. I'll be sat at home watching and wishing these players all the very best of luck in what is an enormous game for them. And they've got to try and treat it like just any other game if they can, if possible. I mean, every channel they put on, they're in their rooms right now. It's difficult, but there's a great opportunity. They've got to embrace it. Love it. That's the thing. Love it. They seem really well prepared, and there's a belief now that England can be successful again.
You might be forgiven for thinking, looking at the coverage, that there isn't another team on the pitch, actually, but there is. So what would you be worried about on the Italian side? Who are the danger men?
Well, Insigne on the left-hand side is a player that he pops into little pockets. Immobile plays really high, and he's going to test our central defenders. But it's really this ferocity of their press in their midfield. They've got a really strong midfield. Barella, Jorginho plays really deep in their midfield, and he passes the ball for fun. He almost like orchestrates things. And when they get out of rhythm in their passing, it's back to him and he resets it. So he's both very good in possession, and as a team, they're extremely well organised. But so are we. And there's a lot of talk about the experience they have. They're two central defenders, Chiellini, Bonucci. You know, he's 36 years of age now. But I'd like to talk about our central defenders. I thought they've been immense. No one's really talking too much about them. Stones, Maguire, and Walker at right back. He's like Speedy Gonzalez, the way he races back and rescues everybody in defence. So we are growing really nicely. Two good midfield players, Phillips, Rice. These guys are cutting their teeth at the really highest level and being quite outstanding. But it's a 50-50 game. You know, it's how you play on the day. But I feel that we've got the edge with our front players. The quality, Sterling's been immense during this competition.
From a technical point of view, actually, what you just said about Kyle Walker, John Stones and Harry Maguire would suggest that you're tempted to stay 4-3 with four at the back. But there is a school of thought that says, actually, what we do need to do is change formation with Saka in the team. What would you say?
Well, I would say that we have a manager now that wants his team to be given the best opportunity. And football's about a numbers game. And we've had the correct numbers in every game that we've played. And even in the last match, when Grealish, who came on to change the match for us, was taken back up again, demonstrated that the manager understood what Denmark were going to do. Immediately there they go, a goal behind. So everything is covered. But I think both teams play 4-3-3. They know the strengths, and it's about who can come off the best. I don't believe we should be changing to a 5, but we have the flexibility to do that. The players are all intelligent enough to do so. The way that they can flip-flop between one system and another just shows you the change of education. And I went out with many tournaments and sat with Gareth Southgate afterwards, sort of analysing and where did we go wrong. And he's done that brilliantly in terms of how they go from one step to the next. And I expect them to be really well prepared, and they're envisaging every step before it happens. That's what they have to do tactically. But the players then carry out that plan beautifully. It's just having that strength, because it's tough sometimes to play at Wembley. And that's disappeared. That's what's encouraged me the most. Now it's a joy again now to play at Wembley. And after COVID and all the issues we've had and the fans coming back, it feels so united. It must be an absolute pleasure for those players to step onto the pitch now at Wembley.
OK, I'd love to talk to you about the nature of the team and the way that they've come through the academy and so on, but we haven't got that much time. You're the only guest who actually has any credible experience to say anything about the score. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, who wins? You said it's 50-50, but if you had to put money on it.
Well, I think 2-1. I've gone with a 2-1, and I'd like to think we can do that within extra time. I don't think it will go to penalties. I'm very confident that England can win this game. And I'm actually, we wanted to talk a little bit this morning about how these players are inspiring the next generation. And I think really a lot of credit must go to the FA with grassroots football programmes along with McDonald's that they've put together. And actually they're out there now in big numbers, thousands of sessions, free sessions, to introduce new young boys and girls into football between the ages of 5 and 11. So today, it's the players on the pitch will inspire the next generation, but it's that initiative from McDonald's and the FA to give opportunities for the next generation to play football, which is what's going to make us champions for the next generation. Because we want to keep winning. If we can win today, we don't want to be waiting another 55 years for more success, Trevor.
Champions for the next generation, that could be the most important thing that comes out of today. Thank you so much, Martin Keown.
Thanks, Trev. Have a good day. Enjoy the game.
You too. So that's the view from the England side. But of course, Italy will be equally determined to win their second European title this evening. Roberto Mancini's team have gone an incredible 33 games unbeaten. Quite the turnaround after failing to qualify for the last World Cup in 2018. We're joined now by Italy's official representative in the UK, top defender, one might say, Ambassador Raffaele Trombetto. Ambassador, where will you be watching the game from tonight?
Good morning, first of all. I'll be at the stadium. I'll be at the stadium with the President of the Italian Republic, who is coming this afternoon. And I'll be there with him and the Italian delegation.
I am so envious of you. But before we talk about the game itself, what's the mood like back home in Italy?
Of course, there is a lot of interest, a lot of expectation, celebration, looking forward to this match, excitement, all the sort of things that also people in England have been experiencing in the last few days and few weeks. But at the end of the day, it's a football match. We want to enjoy it. We want to celebrate it with our English friends, both in England and in Italy. Well,
when you say it's a football match, you're implying, contrary to what the Liverpool manager Bill Shankly once said, it's not life and death. It's more important than that about football. Is it as important to Italy to win tonight as it seems to be to us?
Well, it's always important to win an important match, to win a competition. We have some experience there. I mean, in our history, we won 4 World Cup. We won the European Cup in 1960-68. But each time, it's a new experience, and of course, it's important. It does boost the morale of our people, and we know how important it is now for all over the world. I mean, for English people, for Italian people, to have some very positive things to look forward and to celebrate.
English football fans know Roberto Mancini pretty well from his time at Man City. Do you think that there is anything in the theory that his time in the Premier League has helped him to become the kind of leader that has engineered this extraordinary comeback from 2018 to now, where Italy, frankly, looked like a pretty Rolls-Royce side?
I don't know, but I suppose when you have experience all over the world in other countries, other challenges, of course that make you grow, make you feel better about yourself, more confident. So from this point of view, I do think that the experience that Mancini had in England have helped him. He also has been playing for many years in Italy. But as I say, you take all the best from the different experiences you've had in your career. So I have no doubt that also the time that he spent in England, from this point of view, has had a positive effect, of his experience as a manager of Italy.
There's a lot of talk here about the way that the team has represented England and has, in a way, brought the nation together, united the nation. In Italy, of course, there is, a historic, not division, but essentially there's a north and south issue that's always been talked about in Italy. Do the Azzurri bridge that gap, do you think? I mean, is the Italian team bringing Italy together in the way that we talk about the English team bringing England together?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't really describe it as a division between the north and south of Italy. Of course, there are different issues in the north and the south, but the country has been united for many years. But definitely, the national team is the team of the whole of Italy. There is no real whatsoever division, even if during as it is here, when you play the national championship, the Premier League or the Serie A, as we call it. Of course, you have teams of different cities of this part of Italy and this sort of rivalry. But definitely, the national team is the moment when the whole of Italy feel united and feel backing our team.
All right. Ambassador, look, I couldn't have you here and not deal with an extremely important question which appears to divide our nations. I don't think you can see it, but we saw a banner being held up by some Italian fans which says, "Stop putting pineapple on pizza." Well, look, pizza is, of course, the food of heaven. Even the plain margarita is a superior kind of food. But it turns out, some Italians got some funny views about this. What is wrong with this humble fruit that I am holding up, a pineapple? Why shouldn't it be a part of a pizza?
Of course, you can choose whatever you want to put on the pizza, and there is nothing wrong with the pineapple as such. But then, when you cook and when you prepare something, you always look for the best combination of ingredients. And we since pizza is an Italian dish, is an Italian creation. We know how to do it, and we don't think that with pineapple you would taste the pizza at its best. Then, of course, it's also a question of personal choice.
OK, I know you've got to go, though. Actually, the programme is going to send you a Hawaiian pizza, just so you can see what it's really like. What is the score tonight?
Well, the score for me will be 2-1 to Italy, also because it's the same score that was at the previous important match, both the 1990 European Cup and 2014, the 1990 World Cup and 2014 World Cup, 2-1 to Italy. So I want to continue, let's say, on this trend.
Ambassador, thank you very much. And we wish you the best of luck tonight. And, of course, your team, though not that much luck. Thank you very much indeed. So that's it for today. 5 football predictions. Well, actually, only 3, but there's still one more I need to get. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, will be joining us after the break for Trevor Phillips' The Take, to go over everything we heard in extra time. And though he may not have much football analysis to add, I'll be asking him for a score prediction. That's straight after this break.